Yo, what is good, everybody? What is poppin', y'all? My name is James Jones. I am a childcare worker and photographer, born and raised in Austin, Texas, and welcome to the first episode of Spurt, my new video podcast series where I talk about different experiences that I've gone through in my life in the hopes that you may be able to take or learn or realize something about yourself that you may then be able to take and apply into your everyday personal and professional life. Now, earlier I mentioned I am a child care worker. I have been for the past 7 years now, and every summer for the past 6 of those years, I have spent working at a summer camp in my local area. As a counselor there, it's our job not only to ensure that our campers are being safe and they're getting through all the rotations quickly and efficiently and stuff like that, but it's also our job to create and experience a positive experience that they will then be able to take and carry with them for the rest of their lives. Working at camp, it's literally been one of the best things I've done in my life. I mean, really, it's done a lot for me. Some of the best people in the world work there, and I've been blessed to have really good and strong friendships with a lot of those people. I love the challenge that the job provides as well. I mean, this is a hard job. Any job working with kids is going to be hard, whether it's teaching, whether it's daycare, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be hard. You got to be able to think on your feet. There's things constantly changing. The environment is constantly changing. Trying to work with different people, especially if you're in a leadership position, figuring out the best way how people learn, how to give them feedback, how to give them constructive criticism, stuff like that. And then add in the Texas heat, the midsummer Texas heat, man. Oh, yeah, talk about a challenge. But I love that. But most importantly, the bonds that you build, the interactions that you have with the kiddos, I mean, that is the most rewarding part of this job. Really the most rewarding thing I've done. And I mean, that's really what makes camp camp. That's at the very heart, the very center. That is the foundation of what makes camp camp. But like I said, this job is very challenging, and there are some days that are a lot worse than others. And there was one day, summer 2020, I will never forget, where all of the challenges of that year culminated into one really horrible day, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So we all know what 2020 was like. Lockdowns, Black Lives Matter, presidential election, I mean, all of it. And it's affected us in a lot of personal ways, as I'm sure you can relate. But professionally also affected us, and this was no different at camp. But before we get deeper into that, let me quickly explain the overall structure of camp. So there are 8 units. Each unit has a team of counselors that is headed by 2 members of leadership and the assistant unit coordinator, the AUC, or the unit coordinator, the UC. The unit coordinator being the overall general supervisor of that unit. There is then a level of upper leadership, which consists of the division leads, the camp director, the business director, all those people, and then the changes goes on up from there. This specific summer, I was going into my 4th summer there. I was really excited. It was also going to be my first summer as a unit coordinator. I was really excited. My friends and I, we were all pumped. We were telling ourselves, dude, this is gonna be the best summer ever. Summer 2020, baby. Well, I mean, we were hyped, man. But then one day we started getting calls. And we were told that because of COVID, camp had to downsize. So we went from a camp of 8 units, some 700, 750 kids a day, down to 5 units, maybe 350, 400 kids a day. I mean, camp was literally cut in half. People were let go, people were demoted, people took pay cuts, and some people were way worse than others. I mean, I was blessed. I was only demoted from being a UC down to an AUC. But again, others, including a very close personal friend of mine, I mean, they were really done dirty. Now, of course, that's not anybody's fault. I mean, understandably, we were really upset. But, I mean, God bless our supervisor who had to make all these calls to all these people. But, yeah, again, we were really upset about that. But despite our disappointment, despite our frustrations with the situation. Somebody had to work camp. We had a job to do, and so summer 2020 began. Now, immediately you could just tell the energy was just completely off. We weren't nearly as excited to be there as we were in previous years. It was a constant battle with the campers about wearing their masks and stuff like that. And unfortunately, we as counselors got a little bit complacent with our work. Um, and there was a counselor in my unit. I was in the olders unit. I was in charge of. We had three groups in the unit. We had group one, which was my group, which was like the sixth graders. We had group two, which was seventh grade and up, and that was like our more artsy, our a little bit nerdy, less popular group. And then we had group number three, which had all the cool kids, it had all the athletic kids, all the kids that people wanted to be around. That was group number three. And one of our counselors in charge of group number three got a little bit too complacent and a little bit too comfortable. Now, at this point in the summer, my UC had actually left for the summer. He went off to, he took a new job to be the teacher at some school. So it was my turn to step up. I had to take over the unit. And with our friend, I honestly didn't really take the time to talk to him, which is the first mistake that I made in this situation. Didn't really talk. I mean, that whole summer, didn't really talk to him. So by the time I got to the point where I was actually, his boss in charge, I mean, I was in charge of a person who I had never spent time, building bonds with. And that's what, whenever you're in leadership, it's just as important to build friendships and relationships with your counselors as it is to build those same relationships with your kids. I didn't take the time to do that with this and not just him. It was other people in the unit as well, and that's something that I really fumbled the bag on. And with this, with this counselor, I mean, he would basically just do whatever he wanted. He would change the schedule. He would switch kids in and out of his group depending on if he liked them and if his group liked them, and it was basically a popularity contest when it came to that. Now, before I continue, I want to make it clear that this is not meant to be a roast session against this individual or any other person that we may talk about during this podcast. This is just me speaking from my experience. We all make mistakes, including myself. What matters is that you just do your best to learn and move on from it, right? So, like I said, didn't really take the time to talk to him. But that being said, I mean, his group did really like him. They seemed to respond to him well. I did, have a couple small conversations with the dude and played football with him and their kids out in the field. But again, he would basically just do whatever he wanted. And in my opinion, the most serious of those things was he would go out and bring food to his group. I mean, I'm talking Whataburger, Chick-fil-A, Sonic, all these different things. He would go out, bring them food. And that may seem kind of, innocent on the surface. However, as you'll see, it's the repercussions of showing this kind of favoritism that really have some serious consequences for everybody. So one day, it was or at least it was my last week there at camp. And one of our program staff came up to me and he said, "Hey, I want to have a water balloon fight for one of your groups. Is that okay?" I was like, "Yeah, man, that sounds awesome. So long as all my groups can participate, I see nothing wrong with that." And he said, "Well, actually, I wanted to do it for just one of your groups, my older, cool number 3 group." I told him, "No, not if it's just that group, because that's definitely favoritism. It wouldn't be fair to the other groups. So I appreciate that you want to do this, but if you're going to, you have to include all 3 of my groups." He told me that he understood and that everything was cool, and I was like, "All right, perfect." So we went about our business. The rest of the week, it was cool. Didn't really have any problems after that until that Thursday came around, and by lunchtime that day, it had already been a pretty bad day. I don't want to get too into the specifics, but in short, there was an incident that morning that involved sand socks, literally socks filled with sand, and hitting. Now, the kids who did it had already gotten in trouble for this exact thing earlier in the summer. So of course, immediate write up, phone call home. They were sent home. They couldn't come back. And it was unfortunate because both of these kids, I had been working closely with them and their parents for at least 2 years up until that point. And one of them, actually, after that day, he never came back to camp. So it really, really sucked to see them go off like that. But that's just part of our job, right? That's part of what comes with building these relationships that you do with the kiddos. Whenever they fail, whenever they are unsuccessful, you feel like you fail. You feel like you're unsuccessful as well. So that's really how it felt. And of course, I had to make phone calls to the victims' parents and had to deal with that. And it was just not the best morning. So imagine my dismay when I get back from lunch that same day and receive a call on my walkie telling me that two of my groups, my number 1 and my number 3 group, are out having a water balloon fight without telling my artsy, my little nerdy, my little less cool group or whatever. They literally had a water balloon fight and purposely excluded them from this. So many thoughts were running through my head when I found that out. I just knew I had to go check on my other group. So I called their counselor over on the walkie, asked them where they were at. They told me, and so I went over there. When I get there, one of our campers, who the whole summer I had never had a single problem with. I mean, he was awesome. He would always come up to me. He would say, "Hey, Mr. James, do you need anything? It's good to see you." Same thing with his counselors, always helping out his counselors. Super sweet kid. Completely freaking out, man. He was throwing one of the biggest tantrums I've ever seen at camp. He was so distraught. He was so upset. And so I went over there. I tried to talk with him. I did my best to calm him down, right? And while I'm sitting here talking to the kid, out of the corner of my ear, I hear someone say, "No, you can't say the N-word." Woo. I mean, immediately I'm zoned in on what was going on over there. I excuse myself and I calmly walk over there and I'm listening to them. These two kids, they're going back and forth. "No, you can't say the N-word. That's not okay." "Well, why not? I can say the N-word. There's nothing wrong with it." They're going back and forth, and I interrupt them and I calmly say, well, not calmly, I very firmly but calmly say, "What seems to be the problem over here?" They look at me and they take turns explaining their side. And in a situation like this, it's very easy to overreact. It's very easy to react emotionally rather than logically. Remember, this group had just been excluded from an activity that they were really hoping to be able to do. Myself, I was already on thin ice, so it would have been very easy for me to come up and respond just very negatively in this situation. But instead, I wanted to make sure I took advantage of this moment that was presented to me and used it as a teaching moment. So I asked them, I was like, "Would y'all like to know what I think?" They nodded, and so I told them, this whole summer has been tough on everyone. You and your friends have had to make a lot of sacrifices throughout your time here this summer, from wearing the masks, having to deal with all the different precautions and procedures that we had to implement because of COVID. For your counselors, we've had to make a lot of sacrifices to be here with you guys. We took pay cuts. We lost our jobs literally to be here with y'all. And for myself and your other black/minority counselors, we have had to make a lot of sacrifices to be here with you guys this summer. I told them that, in my opinion, the N-word is an extremely hurtful and derogatory term that really shouldn't ever be used. And I told them, for example, that summer, one day I was pumping gas at the gas station before work, and some individual came up to me and he said, "Hey, N-word, everything that is happening in our country today is the fault of you and the fault of people like you. This is all your fault." Can you imagine having an encounter like that And then I literally had my work shirt on. Like how are you? How how does that happen? Right? Like, imagine having to come to work after something like that happening to you in the midst of, I mean, the whole atmosphere of that summer was just extremely racially charged, right? So imagine having to come to work with all that racially charged energy and pretend like nothing happened. That is what myself and other counselors, black, minority, whoever, were going through that summer. Those are the type of sacrifices that we have had to make to be with you this summer. But I still do my very best, despite all that, to come here with a great attitude, as positive as I can, ready to come and be here with you guys, right? And while I was saying all these things, I mean, you could just see in the kids' eyes how intently they were listening. And I can only imagine the turmoil, the things that was going on inside of these kids' heads. And once I was done, there was a short pause, and it was broken by one of my kids saying, "We're sorry, Mr. James." Group hug time, man. I mean, as soon as they said that, it was just a giant group hug. I mean, some of the kids were crying, some of the counselors were crying. I was doing my best not to cry. I mean, it was a really special moment, and it was honestly, it kind of made everything that had happened up until that point worth it. Not just that day, but everything that happened that whole summer culminated into that moment. And it felt good, man. It felt good. And then afterwards, I went to the kid who had said that it was okay to say the N word, and he was a little Hispanic boy, and I asked him, are you okay? He broke down and he started apologizing profusely. He was saying, "I'm sorry, Mr. James, I didn't mean it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it." And I was asking, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, calm down. Like, what's the matter? What, you didn't mean what? What's the matter?" He said, "I'm sorry for saying the N word. I didn't mean it. I was frustrated because I get called and my dad gets called, derogatory terms all the time." This kid was he's like a fifth, sixth, maybe even seventh grader. Can you imagine what must have been going through his mind? Imagine if I had come up to him whenever they were arguing about saying the N word, and I had come up to him and I had said, or I just ripped into him. I was, saying, "What are you doing? Why do you think it's okay to say the N word? You should know better. That is never okay." Can you imagine how differently this whole situation would have gone if I didn't stop to think about what I was doing in that moment? If I had reacted emotionally rather than logically? When you're faced with adversity, bro, I mean, your true colors will shine in those moments. And I was talking with him and I said, "You have nothing to apologize, man. You have nothing to apologize for. We all have gone through some really insane things throughout this time. You are no different. Don't apologize. You made a mistake. It is okay." And he and I, we hugged it out. And it was just another great moment, right? That would have been completely different otherwise. And it's just a reminder of how important a job working with kids really is. And so after, he went off to go play, and I get a call from my camp director, and he's asking me, where I was, and I told him where I was, and a couple minutes he pulled up, and I told him everything. I told him about what had happened that morning. I told him about the water balloon fights and everything that would happen with that situation. I told him about the N-word and everything that happened with this group just now. I mean, everything. And you know what he said to me? He said, "Well, we just got to do better next time." And he drove away, and I immediately broke down. I mean, the best way I could describe how I was feeling was just so helpless. because I knew that I just couldn't help but feel like this was my fault, that there was something I could have done differently to change and keep this from happening. I mean, we don't know when adversity will strike us. What we do know is that there's always a choice to be made when faced with adverse situations. That being, how am I going to respond? The start of summer camp was cut in half. You lack motivation to work. How do you respond? Coworker, you see they're slacking a bit. You know that something needs to be done. You know that the situation needs to be addressed. How do you respond? If I had taken the time to talk and get to know that counselor just a little bit, could this situation have been different? How could I have responded better to a situation and a mistake that I knew I was making? Kids, they're arguing about a very sensitive topic. You've already had a bad day. Emotions are running high. How do you respond? I came into that summer positive that I knew the answer. I came into that summer positive that I knew how I was going to respond. I'm just going to nip that thing in the butt right there. But I didn't. Moving forward, y'all, I challenge y'all to think about a moment that ruined you and ask yourself, who was involved? What happened? Why did this happen? Where did you go wrong? How could you have responded differently? Y'all, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope that the next time you're faced with an extremely adverse situation, that you decide to take a moment of pause and think about how you're going to respond to it. And I hope that whenever you make that decision, you do everything you can to make sure that you respond positively, logically, non-emotionally. Because you never know how that situation is going to affect something in the future. You just don't. Like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. New episodes of Spurt will be posted every last Friday of the month, so stay tuned. June 20, like 5th or 4th or something like that. Last Friday of June, next podcast will be posted. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. Let me down in the comments. Let's have a conversation, y'all. What is an adverse situation that you were faced with, and how did you respond? What could you have done differently? Let me know, y'all. Let's get this thing going. Again, thank y'all so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Y'all be easy. Stay positive. I'm gonna catch you guys on the flip. Take care, fam. Peace.